Hey, welcome, and today we've got partial payments. So some students were struggling with this, and so I wanted to address this in this short video. So this is Professor G coming at you, and the title today is Star Labs. So we're kind of back to that DC Universe theme of some of the later videos. And so on April 3rd, Team Flash borrowed $15,000 to pay for startup costs for its new particle accelerator, because the other one blew up. And so the loan had a simple interest rate of 6.25% and was for 270 days, right? So this is a short-term, simple interest loan, right? And so the team was able to make partial payments of $6,000 on May the 8th. They have jobs. And then $3,500 on October the 12th, right? So they made those two payments. How much will the team owe on the date of maturity of the loan? Okay, so this is actually three parts, right? So the first part that we're going to talk about is the solution overview, and then we'll talk about each of the partial payments down to that final payment. Okay, so for our solution overview, again, like I said, it's a three-part problem, and each part has a new interest calculation and a new principal. And so we're going to talk about, there's a level of interest that's accumulating on top of the principal, right? And then we're going to pay that down, and then there's a new level of interest on this new partial payment, right? And then we're going to pay that down, and so on. And so the three parts are from May the 3rd to April the 3rd to May 28th, right? Because they start on April the 3rd, and the first payment that they make is on May the 28th, right? And then we're going to go from May the 28th to October the 12th. So they've made this payment, and now they're going to make this payment. And then from October the 12th to the end of the loan, which we don't know what it is except for the 270 days, right? So actually the first thing we need to do is find out when the end of the loan is, okay? And so on April the 23rd, the loan was for 270 days. Now, you can look at a calendar table or you can use technology. There's some options in the TI calculator. There's some options in Excel. But either way, you're going to see that April the 28th is the 93rd day of the year. So I'm actually going to use a table, right? And so here we've got, if you can look, over here, look over here. April the 23rd. April the 3rd is day 93, right? So that's pretty small, but there it is. It's day 93, okay? So day 93 plus 270 days is day 363. So now I need to look up day 363, and you know it's got to be toward the end of the year, right? So again, we're going to look at the table, and we see that day 363 is December the 29th, right? So December the 29th. Okay, so now we're ready to calculate our first partial payment. And what we need to calculate is the interest on the loan from April the 3rd to May the 28th, right? So the current principal is the amount borrowed, right? And so that's the $15,000. This is the full amount, right? That's what they borrowed. They haven't paid anything yet. They're getting ready to. The rate will be the constant throughout, okay? It's not going to change. It's going to be 6.28%, which converts to 0.0625, right? We're going to move the decimal over two places or divide by 100, however you want to do the conversion factor. But the time from the table, we see from April 23rd, from April 3rd, day 93, right? We already looked at that. And May 28th, right? So we got to find May 28th. So again, I go back to my table. May 28th. Oh, that's day 148, right? It's over here in the corner of the video. Day 148. So 148 minus 93 is 55 days. If I pull up my handy dandy calculator, right? 148 minus 93 is the 55 days. I'm going to make this a little smaller, right? So you can see the whole thing on the screen. Okay? So that's what I did. So that's where the 55 days came from. Therefore, we're going to calculate the interest using the I equals PRT formula. Why are we using this formula? Because it tells you it had a simple interest rate. Simple interest is the I equals PRT formula. All right, so that's why you have to use that one. So now we plug in I equals PRT. P is the 15,000. R is the 0.0628. And then 55 divided by 360. Why 360? Banker's rule, right? United States rule. And so we're going to divide that out. So here we go. Ready? 15,000 times 0.0625. Super important to convert that. Times, and then I'm going to have the 55 divided by the 360. And this is the part of the year, because remember, the time is for a full year, right? And so if the time is for a full year and I'm only doing part of a year, I need to know what fraction of a year that is. And so that's going to be the 55 divided by the 360. And so I hit enter, and I get the 143.22.9. And so the 9 is going to round the 2 to a 3. And that's why that's right there. So now the total amount owed, the total amount is always the principal plus the interest. Okay? And so that's the 15,000 plus the 143.23 gives you $15,143.23. All right? Now, we're going to apply the partial payment of $6,000. Where does the $6,000 come from? Remember, the team was able to make a partial payment of $6,000 on May the 28th, right? So, on May the 28th, they're making a partial payment of $6,000. So, we're going to subtract that payment from the total. Remember the total up here. So, the new principal, the new amount that they're going to owe is going to be equal to that total amount of $15,143.23 minus the payment that they made of, I don't know what happened there, $6,000 is going to be $9,143.23. Okay? And so that makes us happy. Unfortunately, though, we're not done. And so now this second partial payment, we need to calculate the interest on the loan from May the 28th to October the 12th, right? This is the next level, right? So we did the first part, now we're on to part 2, right? And so now we've paid down the principal, okay, right? And so there's a little bit of interest that's accumulated in this new period, and that's going to bring us to our new total, all right? So the current principal is the amount left after the first partial payment. That's the $9,143.23. That rate will be, the rate is constant throughout, right? Converts to 0.0625. And the time from the table we see from May 28th, remember that was day 148, to October the 12th is day 285. And again, I'm going to go to October the 12th. There's my day 285. There it is on the chart. Look on the chart. Okay? And so we're going to get 140 days. Therefore, we calculate the interest using the I equals PRT formula because, again, we're still calculating simple interest. Okay? And so, we're the $9,143.23. Remember, that's the amount after that first partial payment times the constant rate times the 140 divided by 360, right? So, again, we got to take the time in years and find the part of a year. I've got to find that fraction of a year. And so, again, I'm going to have the $9,143.23 times the 0.0625 times 140 days out of 360 days in a banker's year, right? Because we're doing days in a banker's year, and I end up with $220.23. Now, I have less principal, but I had a much longer number of days, right? Before I had 55 days on $15,000, right? Now I've got $9,000, but I've got almost 3 times as many days. So because it's 3 times longer, that's why the interest is a lot higher. Okay, so even though I paid down the principal, right, because the number of days was a lot more, the interest is a lot higher. But think about it. If I hadn't paid the $6,000, I would have been paying interest on all $15,000, and so the interest would have been a lot bigger, right? So the new total amount is the principal that I owed plus the interest this new principal after the first partial payment is the $93,065.46 minus the $3,500. You're like, whoa, where does the $3,500 come from? Man, if only they told us in the formula that the $3,500 would be paid on October the 12th, and it does. See, look right there. So, what happens after we subtract? We get $5,865.46. Now, they're not making any more payments. That was the last payment on October the 12th. And so now we need to know what the team owes on the date that it matures. And we know that the date that it matures is December the 29th. All right? So for our third and final partial payment, right, we need to calculate the interest on the loan from October the 12th to December the 29th. And so the current principal is the amount left after the second partial payment, and that's the $5,865.46. The rate will be constant throughout, so again, we're going to have 0.0625. And the time from the table, we see October the 12th is day 285. We had that from before. And we know that December the 29th is day 363. Because remember, when we go back to the table, right? October the 12th, there's the 285. December the 29th, there's day 363, right? It's right there. So we know what those two dates are because we already figured them out. And the 363 minus the 285 is 78 days. And if you add, you're going to get pretty close to 270, and which is what you want to get, right? Because it's a 270-day loan. Therefore, we calculate the interest using the I equals PRT formula because, again, we are not doing anything but a simple interest rate. And a simple interest rate always has I equals PRT. Okay? Not until we get to the compound interest do things get a little more complicated. So again, I'm plugging in with the 78 over the 360 to get $79.43. So let's do that real quick. Right? So we've got the 5865.46, 5865.46 times 0.0625 times 78 over 360. Because again, it's banker's rule. There's the $79.43. $79.43. So now the total amount owed is that principal plus the interest. So I add those two numbers together. Right, so adding the 79.43 is going to give you 59.44.80. The 8 makes that a 9. 89. And so the amount due on the last day, the 29th, is going to be $5,944.89. And that, right, makes us happy. All right? I hope you enjoyed this video. I went fast, but don't forget you can pause it. That also makes us happy. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.